It was another media scrum at Westminster Magistrates Court today. Despite being granted conditional bail, Julian Assange is still in custody tonight, pending an appeal by the Swedish authorities who want to extradite him to answer allegations of sexual offences. That appeal should be heard within 48 hours, breathing space for the WikiLeaks founder's celebrity supporters to stump up £200,000 in cash and deliver it to the court. We'll be speaking to Mark Stevens, Mr Assange's lawyer, who claims the process is more persecution than prosecution. After this report from our Home Affairs correspondent Andy Davies, who was in court today, it does contain some flash photography.
Julian Assange was on his way back to court this morning from solitary confinement in Wandsworth Prison, with the focus once again of intense public interest.
You reckon that's him?
They were desperate for that shot, and Assange, the enigmatic, media-savvy man that he is, duly obliged, it seemed. He is wanted by the Swedish authorities, vilified by many in the American right-wing press, among others. But the man who may yet top the poll of Time magazine's Person of the Year has strong allies in the UK, and they were out in force once again today to support his application for bail in a case involving allegations of sexual assault.
Julian out.
The veteran campaigning journalist John Pilger was back to offer monetary and moral support. So too the film director Ken Loach. The campaigner and socialite Jemima Khan was among the seemingly growing band of what the court heard were distinguished well-wishers in this case. And so too the human rights activist Bianca Jagger, all offering thousands of pounds in surety for Julian Assange. And at the back of the court today in the public gallery stood Christine Assange, his mother. She'd flown in from Australia and spoke earlier to Australia Television about visiting her son in prison.
Initially, as I said, I thought it was fairly obvious that something else was going on here. But having received the full timeline and the facts of the case, I've got absolutely no doubt that there's other agendas afoot, and that my son's being sacrificed to those other agendas.
The Swedish authorities want Julian Assange extradited to face allegations that he assaulted two women on separate occasions on the 14th and 17th of August this year. Within days of the alleged offences, a Swedish prosecutor issued a warrant for his arrest, but it was soon withdrawn. 10 days later, a more senior prosecutor reopened what's being called a rape investigation, and by mid-November, Stockholm District Court approved a request to detain Mr Assange, who at the time was in the UK.
Please, Julian, now!
There were about 100 Assange supporters outside court today, vying for pavement space with the international media, as his lawyers argued once again, successfully this time, that while the extradition case is heard, Julian Assange should be granted bail. The allegations did not amount to rape, they claimed, and even if convicted, it was questionable, they said, whether he'd even receive a custodial sentence. One of the deciding factors in bail being granted today, said District Judge Howard Riddle, was that this time the police had been able to verify his bail address. And the plan, we learned, was that he would be staying on a 600-acre estate in Suffolk owned by a friend. As his barrister quipped, in effect not so much under house arrest as under mansion arrest. That well-placed friend is Vaughan Smith, the former captain in the Grenadier Guards turned journalist.
I wanted to make a stand for the underdog. I think it's incredibly important at this time. I think we'll be judged by our tolerance in dealing with Mr Assange.
I've just had a message on the telephone to tell me that the Swedish prosecutor has indicated to the British authorities that they will not be appealing this bail decision.
There was further drama this evening as his legal team thought initially that their client would be free within the next 24 hours. But it soon transpired that the Swedish authorities had in fact launched an appeal. And so this evening, as the political firestorm surrounding his website's latest releases continues unabated, the man at the centre of it all, Julian Assange, heading back to prison, struck a final defiant pose for the press.
Andy Davies, well, joining us now in the studio is Julian Assange's lawyer, Mark Stevens. Are you sure, Mark Stevens, that this is all so odd? I mean, surely Sweden is perfectly within its rights to continue to try and get the guy they wish to question.
Of course they're within their rights to pursue an extradition warrant. The critical question here, John, is whether they're entitled to have him in custody over Christmas in Wandsworth Prison, in isolation on 23 and a half hours lockdown, no association, no access to the internet, no access to news or any other form of communication. He's not getting letters from lawyers or friends and well-wishers. And as a result of that, or whether he's entitled to be on bail, as we heard, at a location approved by the police, at a location with people approved by the police.
Mansion arrest sounds rather grand. I mean, is he tagged there?
There's a sort of tagging arrangement. He'll certainly be geolocated. He has to be within the building for 8 hours a day, 2 4-hour sets, one at night and one during the day, so that he can be tagged effectively there. But because it's a large estate, those kind of tags don't work. The sort of leg tags don't work over 600 acres. They work well in council houses and things, but they don't really work in those confined spaces.
Sweden may well argue that these well-heeled celebrities that have come in to offer bail for him can afford to lose the odd 10 or 20,000 while he does it.
Well, they might say that, but the reality is that he's entitled to bail. They have to show, the Swedish authorities have to show that there are no conditions that we could conceive of that would allow him, as is his right, as an innocent man, as a person who's not been charged, to be out on bail. And what the judge said today, Howard Riddle, was that there were conditions that he could be put up that would assure him that Julian Assange would comply with his bail conditions. This is just the Swedes continuing with their vindictive campaign to spend any amount of money to make Julian Assange spend time in jail for an offence which in Sweden, I'm told by legal experts over there, he's unlikely, even if convicted, to go to jail for.
Well, what is this about? Is it about sex or leaks?
I suspect it's about leaks. I think there's got to be some kind of agenda behind this, or it's about some kind of political interference. We know that this odd character, Klaus Bergstrom, was in the middle of a political campaign for the Swedish election.
This is the man who revived the prosecution in Sweden.
This is the guy who revived the prosecution. We know that he was in the middle of standing for a political office for the Swedish Social Democratic Party at the time. The election took place on the 19th of November. So it smacks really of a highly politicised stunt where you've got a politician playing
Nevertheless, there are serious offences here that need to be answered.
Sure, but we're dealing at the moment with the extradition warrant. We're dealing with that. And when we deal with the extradition warrant, we'll go through it. But even as we speak now, Julian Assange is perfectly happy to meet again with the prosecutor. He's already met her once.
You complained that this is turning into a show trial, but one could argue you're making it into a show trial.
Well, I have offered, that my Swedish co-counsel has offered, to meet the Swedish prosecutor at the International Interview Suite at Scotland Yard, at the Swedish Embassy, at Wandsworth Jail, which would perhaps be a convenient location at the moment, so she can ask any question she wants. And she is intransigent and she has set her face against it. She has gone through a warrant process which is completely unnecessary.
Let me just ask you about him, because I mean, this is somebody who has lived by the computer, by the laptop, for the last 10 years, and he's deprived of it for the first time in all that time. Is he suffering?
Yeah, I mean, it gets sort of cold. It's kind of going cold turkey for him. And yes, he is finding it very difficult because he doesn't watch television. There isn't television to watch, in fact. And he hasn't really got anything for intellectual stimulation. There are no books, there are no reading materials that he can use. There's no letters, and he has no internet.
I gather even Time magazine was banned because it had his picture on the front.
Yeah, I mean, totally bizarrely, here you have an innocent man in jail who's on remand, not charged with anything, in isolation, and they say you can't even have the Time magazine because your picture's on the cover, and they destroy the whole magazine. They don't even just take his picture off. It is bonkers.
Mark Stevens, thank you very much for coming in. We've much more on the whole WikiLeaks saga on our website, channel4.com/news, where you can also join our live blog debate using the hashtag C4News. There's been